You're not going to believe what happened with my HOA. So, picture this. I'm just trying to live my life peacefully when suddenly, strange charges start popping up on my HOA bills, stuff that didn't make any sense. I'm a forensic accountant by trade, so digging into shady numbers is basically my second nature. I knew something wasn't right. When I started asking questions, that's when Karen, the head of the HOA board, came storming in. She was loud, defensive, and way too eager to shut me down. At first, I thought maybe she was just stressed or didn't understand the books. But when I requested to see the financial records, things got really weird. Documents started disappearing. Emails were suddenly lost. And then one day, I caught her red-handed, literally shredding evidence in the HOA office. I couldn't believe it. She actually thought she could get away with destroying records without anyone noticing, especially not a forensic accountant. What Karen didn't know was that I had already backed up everything. Every receipt, every payment, every shady transaction saved. When the police got involved, she still tried to talk her way out of it. But trust me, the evidence was too strong. You'll never guess what happened next, because this story only gets crazier from here. Stick around, you won't want to miss it. So, here's where things really started to unravel. A few weeks before all the drama, I had noticed some weird charges like community beautification project and emergency maintenance fees that nobody in the neighborhood even knew about. When I asked my neighbors, most of them hadn't heard a thing. Some even said they had been warned not to question the board. That's when I realized this wasn't just a little mistake. It was a whole setup, and Karen was right in the middle of it. Karen had been running the HOA like her personal kingdom for years. She picked her friends for the board, shut down any complaints, and made sure nobody got too curious. Honestly, if I hadn't been trained to spot financial fraud, I probably wouldn't have caught it either. She knew just enough to make the books look clean, but there were tiny inconsistencies, the kind most people would miss, that gave her away. After I backed up the records, I started noticing weird things. Anonymous notes left at my door telling me to mind my business. HOA meeting notices suddenly stopped coming to me, and once I even caught someone snooping around my car late at night. It was clear Karen and her little circle were getting nervous. But I wasn't about to back down, not when I was so close to the truth. As the pressure built, I realized I couldn't trust anyone on the HOA board. Every time I tried to bring up the missing funds at meetings, Karen would shut me down, claiming I was misinformed or confused. She even tried to embarrass me in front of the neighborhood, throwing around words like conspiracy theorist and troublemaker. But the harder she pushed, the more obvious it became that something wasn't right. I wasn't the only one starting to ask questions either. Neighbors who once stayed quiet were beginning to whisper, wondering where their HOA fees were really going. Behind the scenes, I kept digging. I found that the beautification projects Karen bragged about had no official permits. The so-called emergency repairs were billed to companies that didn't even exist. It was classic HOA fraud, hidden under layers of fake paperwork. What's worse, I started to uncover evidence that a few vendors were actually Karen's family members, getting paid with HOA money for work that was never done. Meanwhile, the tension around the neighborhood was getting thick. Some residents were scared to speak up, worried about retaliation. Others were tired of the rising HOA fees with nothing to show for it. A few brave neighbors started quietly reaching out to me, sharing their own stories and suspicious charges they had noticed. It wasn't just me anymore, it was becoming a movement. But the more truth we uncovered, the more dangerous things started to feel. The tipping point came one night after a heated HOA meeting. Karen was more aggressive than ever, cutting people off mid-sentence and refusing to answer basic questions about the budget. It was clear she was losing control, and honestly, it only made her more reckless. I noticed her slipping up, contradicting things she had said just weeks before. That's when I knew it was time to make my move. Working with a few trusted neighbors, we organized a full audit request, backed by a petition that had quickly gained signatures. When Karen found out, she completely lost it. She called an emergency private board meeting, trying to shut everything down before the audit could happen. But what she didn't realize was that I had already handed off copies of the key documents to a local attorney, and the police were already starting to take notice. Around this time, strange things started happening. Someone slashed the tires on my car. I started getting anonymous, threatening messages stuffed into my mailbox. Other neighbors reported HOA letters full of false fines and violation notices, clearly aimed at anyone supporting the audit. It felt like Karen was spiraling, pulling every desperate move she could to stay in control. The neighborhood was on edge. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the breaking point that was coming fast. Just when it felt like things couldn't get any crazier, a second bombshell dropped. One of Karen's closest allies on the HOA board, someone who had been backing her at every single meeting, suddenly flipped. Quietly, he reached out to me, asking if we could meet in private. At first, I didn't trust it. It felt too convenient, like it might be a trap. But after some back and forth, we agreed to meet in a public place just to be safe. What he told me changed everything. Turns out, Karen wasn't just skimming HOA funds, she had been blackmailing board members too. She had dirt on almost everyone around her, threatening to expose personal secrets if they didn't go along with her shady decisions. That's why nobody ever questioned her, even when it was obvious something shady was happening. And the best part, this board member had proof. Emails, recordings, even signed documents that connected Karen directly to the fraud and intimidation. Hearing all of this made the whole situation way bigger than just HOA fraud. It was a full-on abuse of power, and people's lives had been dragged into it. Meanwhile, Karen kept acting like she was untouchable, still sending out threatening letters and trying to scare anyone who spoke up. But now, with this new evidence in my hands, I knew the final confrontation was coming, and it was going to be explosive. The night of the final HOA meeting, the room was packed. You could feel the tension the moment you walked in. Neighbors who had once been scared to say anything were now sitting together, whispering, holding copies of the documents I had helped them gather. Karen walked in acting like everything was normal, smiling that fake smile she always put on when she was trying to stay in control. But you could see it in her eyes. She knew the walls were closing in. Right as the meeting started, I stood up and calmly laid everything out. The missing money, the fake invoices, the blackmail. I presented the emails, the bank statements, the recordings. The room went dead silent. Karen's face went from confident to panicked in seconds. And just when she tried to deny it all, 2 police officers walked into the room, papers in hand. They had been quietly investigating behind the scenes, building a case the whole time. Karen was officially arrested right there, in front of the whole neighborhood. People started clapping, some even crying out of pure relief. You'd think that would be the end of the story, but here's the twist. After her arrest, investigators found out Karen wasn't even legally eligible to run the HOA board. She had forged documents to get her position in the first place. The entire HOA had been under fake leadership for years, and now everything had to be rebuilt from scratch. After Karen's arrest and the shocking reveal that she'd have faked her way into the HOA leadership, the whole neighborhood had to come together to rebuild. We worked with a legal team to reset the board, elect new members, and fix years of messed up financial records. It wasn't easy. There were a lot of late nights, heated discussions, and tough decisions. But for the first time in years, people actually had a real voice again. It felt like the community was finally ours, not controlled by fear or shady HOA fraud. Neighbors who had once been afraid to even ask simple questions were now volunteering to help. We set up open meetings, clear budgets, and full transparency on everything the HOA did. Watching everyone come together made all the chaos feel worth it. Even though it started with one person digging into some strange numbers, it ended with an entire neighborhood standing up for what was right. The biggest lesson I learned: never underestimate how much power a few determined people can have when they're willing to stand up to corruption. And honestly, if you ever suspect something shady going on in your HOA, trust your instincts, because you never know, your forensic accounting skills might just save your whole community too.